Welcome to GoReadling Bedtime Stories, presented by GoReadling.com, personalized education and reading skills for kids. Find a comfortable spot, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let our story carry you gently off to sleep. Tonight's story is called Pocahontas, Daughter of the River. Long, long ago, before great cities stood where forests once grew, there was a beautiful land of tall green trees, wide flowing rivers, and skies so big they seemed to go on forever. The rivers were clear as glass, and the forests were full of deer, rabbits, and songbirds. In this land, by the banks of a great wide river, lived a girl named Pocahontas. Her name meant playful one, and it suited her perfectly. She was the daughter of the great chief of her people, a wise and strong leader whom everyone respected. Pocahontas had dark hair that flowed behind her when she ran, and eyes that sparkled with curiosity about everything in the world around her. Every single morning, she would wake up just as the sun was painting the sky in soft pinks and glowing golds, and she would run outside to greet the new day. The cool grass was wet with dew under her bare feet. The birds sang their first songs of the morning. The river murmured softly as it flowed past the village. And Pocahontas felt that the whole world was alive and speaking to her, if only she would listen. Pocahontas loved the forest more than anything. She knew every winding path, every mossy rock, every hollow tree where the owl slept during the day. She could find the sweetest berries hidden in the brambles and the freshest water from the coldest springs. A playful raccoon often followed her on her walks, chittering and tumbling through the leaves, always looking for something to eat. A tiny hummingbird would zip around her head, its wings buzzing like a little song. The deer in the meadow did not run from her. The fish in the river came to the surface when she sat by the bank. It was as if the animals knew she was their friend. Her father, the chief, watched her with a mix of pride and worry. "You are wild as the wind, my daughter," he would say, shaking his head but smiling. "One day you must learn to sit still." But Pocahontas did not want to sit still. There was too much to see, too much to discover. She felt in her heart that something important was waiting for her, though she did not yet know what it was. Sometimes, when the evening was quiet and the fireflies danced above the river, Pocahontas would sit beneath the oldest tree in the forest, a great, ancient oak, with roots that spread like rivers themselves and branches that seemed to hold up the sky. She would press her hand against its rough bark and close her eyes, and she would listen. The wind rustled through the oak's leaves, making a sound like a gentle, whispering voice. She could almost hear words in the rustling, words of patience, of courage, of change. "Great tree," Pocahontas whispered one evening, "I feel something is coming. Something is going to change. I can feel it like a storm before it arrives. What should I do?" The wind blew gently through the branches, and the leaves shimmered silver in the fading light. Pocahontas did not hear words, not exactly, but she felt something deep in her chest, a calm certainty that whatever was coming, she was strong enough to face it. She opened her eyes and looked up at the stars, appearing one by one in the darkening sky, and she took a slow, steady breath. Far, far away, across the great ocean, a ship was sailing toward the land where Pocahontas lived. It was a tall wooden ship with great white sails that caught the wind, carrying men from a faraway country called England. These men had never seen this land before. They had heard stories of forests full of riches, of rivers running with gold, and they were eager to find them. Among the men was a young explorer named John Smith. He was brave and curious, and unlike many of the others, he cared more about seeing new places than finding treasure. He stood at the ship's railing, staring at the horizon where the sea met the sky. What will we find? He wondered. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, blue-gray and sparkling under the sun. The sailors grumbled about the long voyage. The food was stale. The water was running low. But John felt a thrill of excitement. He could sense that this journey would change his life, though he could not have known how much. After many long weeks at sea, the ship finally reached the shore. The men cheered as they saw the green trees and sandy beach. They climbed into small boats and rowed to land. The air smelled of pine and wildflowers, so different from the smoky, dirty cities they had left behind. They built a small fort near the river and began to explore. But their leader, a proud and greedy man, cared only about finding gold. "Dig," he ordered his men. "Cut down the trees. Search every hill and valley." The men did as they were told, chopping trees and digging holes. John Smith felt uneasy. He looked around at the ancient, beautiful forest and the wide, clean river, and he thought, "We are guests in this land. We should treat it with respect." But no one listened to him. Meanwhile, in her village upstream, Pocahontas could hear the distant sounds of chopping and hammering. She crept through the forest to see what was happening, quiet and invisible among the trees. One afternoon, John Smith wandered away from the fort to explore the forest on his own. He walked along the riverbank, marveling at the beauty around him, the towering trees, the crystal water, the bright flowers growing wild. He had never seen a place so untouched and alive. He sat down on a mossy rock by the river and listened to the water flowing. It was the most peaceful moment he had experienced in months. And then he felt it, the strange sensation of being watched. He turned slowly. There, standing between two birch trees, was Pocahontas. She had been watching him for several minutes, curious about this pale-skinned stranger who sat quietly by the river instead of chopping and digging like the others. Their eyes met. Neither of them moved. The forest was very still, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. John raised his hand slowly, palm open, a gesture of peace. He tried to smile, though his heart was pounding. Pocahontas studied him with her bright, sharp eyes. She saw that he carried no weapon. She saw that he had been sitting quietly, listening to the river. She decided he was not dangerous. Cautiously, she stepped forward. "Hello," John said softly, not knowing if she could understand him. Pocahontas tilted her head. She did not know his words, but she understood his tone, gentle and friendly. She pointed to the river and said its name in her language. John repeated it, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. Pocahontas smiled for the first time. She pointed to a bird in the tree and said its name. John repeated it again, and she pointed to herself. "Pocahontas," she said. "Pocahontas," John repeated carefully. Then he pointed to himself. "John." They stood there by the river, two people from completely different worlds, teaching each other words one by one, while the afternoon sunlight filtered golden through the leaves. Over the next few days, they met in secret by the river. Each time, they taught each other more words. Pocahontas showed John the plants that were safe to eat and the ones that were medicine. She showed him how to walk silently through the forest, heel to toe, like the deer. She showed him where the beavers built their dams and where the eagles nested in the cliffs above the river. John was amazed. "You know everything about this land," he said, struggling with her language but trying his best. Pocahontas smiled. "This land is not something separate from us," she said, speaking slowly so he could understand. "We are part of it. The trees, the river, the animals, the sky, we are all connected, like threads in the same blanket. You cannot pull one thread without changing the whole pattern." John was quiet for a long time, thinking about her words. In his country, people tried to own the land, to shape it and control it. But Pocahontas's people lived with the land, as part of it. It was a completely different way of seeing the world. But beyond the quiet peace of the river, trouble was growing. The men from the fort were cutting down more and more trees and digging deeper into the earth. They had not found any gold, and they were becoming frustrated and suspicious. They began to fear Pocahontas's people, whom they had never spoken to or tried to understand. "They might attack us," the men whispered to each other. "We should strike first." At the same time, Pocahontas's people were growing wary too. They saw the strangers destroying the forest and poisoning the river with their digging. The warriors wanted to drive them away. "These men do not respect our land," they told the chief. "We must protect ourselves." Both sides feared what they did not understand. Pocahontas could see the danger building, like dark clouds gathering before a storm. She had to do something. Pocahontas went to her father, the chief. He sat by the council fire, his face serious and troubled. "Father," she said, kneeling beside him, "I have met one of the strangers. He is not like the others. He is kind and wants to learn about our land. Not all of them wish us harm." The chief looked at his daughter with concern. "You should not be near them," he said firmly. "They are dangerous. We do not know their ways." "That is exactly the problem," Pocahontas replied gently. "We do not know each other. And because we do not know each other, we are afraid. If we could talk, if we could listen, perhaps we would not need to fight." The chief was silent for a long moment. He loved his daughter, and he knew she was wise beyond her years. But he was also a leader, responsible for protecting his people. "Bring this stranger to me," he said at last. "I will hear what he has to say. But one wrong step, and I will send him away forever." Pocahontas brought John to the village. He came alone, without weapons, as a sign of trust. The villagers watched him warily. The warriors stood with their arms crossed, their faces stern. The children hid behind their mothers and peeked out curiously. The chief sat on a raised platform, surrounded by elders. John bowed respectfully and spoke slowly, using the words Pocahontas had taught him. "I come in peace," he said. "I want to understand your ways. I believe our peoples can live side by side without hurting each other." The chief studied him for a long time. He looked into John's eyes, searching for truth. Then, slowly, the chief extended his hand. "Sit," he said. "Tell me about your land across the sea." And so John sat, and he talked, and the chief listened. They did not agree on everything. Their ways were very different, but they talked, and in talking, the first small seed of understanding was planted. Back at the fort, however, the greedy leader was furious. He did not want peace. He wanted gold, and he believed the native people were hiding it. He gathered his men and told them, "We march tonight. We will take what is ours." When John heard this, he was horrified. "No," he said, "I have spoken with their chief. They are willing to talk. There does not need to be any fighting." But the leader laughed. "You have gone soft, Smith. These are savages. They do not understand anything but force." John stood firm. "You are wrong," he said quietly. "They understand the land, the seasons, and the stars better than any of us. They are not our enemies. They could be our teachers if we would only listen." Some of the men looked uncertain. Others looked at the ground. A few nodded slowly. The leader was still angry, but he was outnumbered. That night, there was no march. John had bought them time. Pocahontas, hearing about the near conflict from John, knew the peace was fragile. One misunderstanding could shatter it. She spent the following days moving between the two groups, carrying messages, explaining customs, smoothing misunderstandings. When the strangers accidentally trampled a sacred herb garden, she explained its importance and helped replant it. When one of the warriors threatened a newcomer gathering water at the river, she calmed him down and introduced them properly. It was exhausting work, but Pocahontas felt it was the most important thing she had ever done. "You are like a bridge," John told her one evening as they sat by the river, "a bridge between our worlds." Pocahontas looked at the water flowing past them, reflecting the first evening stars. "A bridge only works if people are willing to walk across it," she said. "Both sides must choose to take that step." The raccoon curled up at her feet, and the hummingbird rested on a low branch nearby. The forest was peaceful, for now. As the weeks passed, something remarkable began to happen. Some of the strangers started to learn from Pocahontas's people how to fish the river, which plants were medicine, how to build shelters that stayed warm in winter. And some of Pocahontas's people grew curious about the strangers' ways, their metal tools, their writing, their stories of lands across the ocean. The children from both groups were the first to truly mix. They played together by the river, splashing and laughing, teaching each other games and words. The adults watched, at first cautiously, then with growing smiles. Children do not see enemies, they see other children. It was not perfect. There were arguments and misunderstandings nearly every day, but people were talking, and that made all the difference. Pocahontas's father watched from a distance and nodded slowly to himself. "My daughter was right," he admitted to the elders. "Fear grows in silence. Understanding grows in conversation." One evening, a great feast was held, the first time both groups had shared a meal together. Pocahontas's people brought corn, squash, beans, and freshly caught fish. The strangers brought bread, cheese, and a warm apple drink. They sat together in a wide circle around a fire, and as the flames crackled and the stars came out, they shared food and stories. An elder from the village told the story of how the rivers were formed. A sailor from the ship told the tale of a great sea creature. The children listened with wide eyes, mouths open. Pocahontas sat between her father and John, translating back and forth, her heart full. This was what she had felt was coming. Not war, not conflict, but this. People from different worlds sitting together, sharing a meal, and beginning to understand each other. Eventually, the time came for the ship to sail back to England. Some of the men had decided to stay, having grown to love the land and its people. Others were eager to return home, with stories of the beautiful forests and the wise, generous people they had met. John came to say goodbye to Pocahontas by the river, in the same spot where they had first met. "I wish I could stay," he said, "but I must tell my people what I have learned here, that your people are wise and good, and that this land should be treated with respect, not greed." Pocahontas nodded. She understood. "The river flows in two directions," she said. "It goes out to the sea, and the sea comes back to the shore. Perhaps you will return one day." They stood together in the golden afternoon light, grateful for the friendship that had changed them both. As the ship sailed down the river toward the open ocean, Pocahontas stood on a high rock overlooking the water. The wind blew gently through her hair. The raccoon sat on the rock beside her, nibbling on an acorn. The hummingbird hovered nearby, its wings catching the sunlight. She watched the white sails grow smaller and smaller until they were just a tiny dot on the far horizon. She did not feel sad. She felt grateful. She had learned that the world was much bigger than she had imagined, and that people who seemed completely different could find common ground if they had the courage to try. Her father came and stood beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders. "You have done a brave thing, my daughter," he said quietly. "You chose understanding over fear. That takes more courage than any warrior has." Pocahontas leaned against her father and watched the last golden light of the sunset spread across the water. That night, Pocahontas sat beneath the great old oak tree one last time. The stars were thick and bright above her, and the forest was filled with the gentle sounds of crickets and the distant call of an owl. She pressed her hand against the oak's rough bark and closed her eyes. The wind moved through the leaves, whispering softly, and this time she felt she understood what it was saying. It spoke of seasons that change, of rivers that keep flowing, of roots that grow deep and strong, and of seeds that travel on the wind to grow in new places. She smiled. She was Pocahontas, daughter of the river, friend of the forest, a bridge between worlds. And whatever the future held, she was ready to meet it with an open heart and steady feet. The river murmured its lullaby. The stars sparkled gently. The raccoon curled up in the leaves beside her and fell asleep. And the great old forest settled into its deep, soft, peaceful nighttime quiet. Good night, little one. Sleep well.
And that is the end of our story. Thank you for listening to GoReadling Bedtime Stories. Visit GoReadling.com for more stories, reading adventures, and fun learning for kids. Sweet dreams, little one. Good night.